Well, hey guys, my name is Rory and I am the discipleship pastor here at Compass. I'm super glad to be here with you this weekend. Pastor Nate, if you're a visitor with us, campus pastor Nate Grella is usually who is up here, but his grandfather passed away this past week, and so he went back home to Ohio, got to be with his family as they kind of celebrated his grandfather's life. So normally, I am not who would be up here preaching, but this is what you got this weekend, so we're gonna make it work. Man, we have, as LaMarcus said, we have had such a good time going through this series called Drop the Mic, and we're going to continue to look at Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. But before we do that, I have to ask a question. How many of you can remember the last time that you got really angry? Like really angry? Okay, a couple of honest people in the front, some on the side. The rest of you we'll talk about lying in a few weeks. Anger is this very interesting thing because it creeps up and it hangs out in our lives. Maybe for some of you, the last time you were angry was 2 weeks ago when the Cowboys lost to the Rams. Maybe that's when the anger happened. You had to go buy a new TV because you threw something at your old one. Maybe you got angry on the drive here. If so, we're so glad that you're here at Compass this weekend. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe your spouse right now just makes you so angry. Maybe it's your boss. Maybe it's your kids. Maybe you wish your kids lived a little bit differently. They drive you crazy, and you have had these experiences of anger recently. I remember the last time that I got really, really angry. Now, I just want to share with you, I'm a pastor here. I don't really know how that happened. So you're going to hear this story and you're going to be like, this guy's a little bit weird. I don't know that we want to go to church here. That's fair. So my wife and I this past year, we bought our first home, which was awesome. We moved in. It was great. Prior to living in that house, we lived in an apartment. And our apartment complex was awesome. It was a brand new build. Everything was clean. It was well taken care of. And because we all know that there are like two kinds of apartments, right? There's the ones where you contract impetigo, and then there's the ones that don't have it. And we were in the one that doesn't have it. And it was great. It was actually so great that they actually would take our trash out for us. Like all we had to do was just sit it right by the door and they would pick it up every night. We didn't have to go down to a dumpster. It was fantastic. I loved it. It was my favorite thing. Well, one night I took the trash out and as I was like tying it up, I realized, right, because there's certain bags of garbage that are worse than the others. You know these things. And this was an awful smelling bag of garbage. There was like old food in it. We cleaned out the fridge. There was bills in it with, if they're enough, those smell as well. There were dirty paper towels. It was awful. But I set it out there, tied it up, went back inside. A couple hours later, I'm getting ready to go to bed. I go out to bring the can that this bag was in, and there is garbage all over in front of my door. The bag had obviously ripped when the garbage man went to pick it up, and he did nothing about it. Now, what happened was I got angry immediately. I went from 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds. I was done. I was out of there. And you know, when you get angry, you begin to have this like inner dialogue with yourself, right? It starts very innocent, right? You start asking questions. Why did this happen? I think I tied the bag. I put it in the can outside of the door. I followed all the instructions. Then it becomes accusatory, right? I'm thinking, well, why did the garbage man not just knock and say, hey, the bag ripped? Why didn't he like try to pick it up? And then it gets a little more extreme and you have that thought of, can I commit murder and get away with it? And no one asks questions, right? Your anger slowly begins to build and build. And then it gets to this place where you go, you know what? I'll show them. I'm gonna solve this problem. Because anger is essentially this feeling that something unjust has been done to you. So this is what I did. Again, not my finer moment. I scoop all of the garbage, including the broken garbage bag, into the garbage can. Now, while I'm doing this, because this is a bit of a production, I'm being loud, my wife is asking questions, trying to figure out what's going on. But she's so sweet and so kind, I know if I tell her my plan, she would immediately put a stop to it. So I just don't talk. I just go like tunnel vision, I'm scooping this garbage up. I get the garbage, it's all in this can, and I march down to the front door office of the apartment complex building. And I dump that garbage out in front of the office door. Again, we're glad that you came once. If you choose not to come back, we will not judge you. I dump it out. I've never been so proud in my life. I was like, I have done exactly what I set out to do. This will show them. They won't ever mess with me again. They're probably gonna give me free rent for a year because of this. I've proven my worth. I walk up to the apartment, back to our apartment. put the garbage can down. I sit down. I'm smiling. My chest is puffed out. I feel good. My wife goes, so what'd you do? Well, I dumped the garbage out in front of the apartment complex office door. Without blinking, she just goes, so when are you gonna go pick it up? Pick it up? I'm not picking it up. But in that moment, I went, oh my gosh, I'm a moron. I just dumped garbage in front of an office building because I'm angry, right? Maybe you've never gone to those lengths. I'm actually gonna say, I hope you've never gone to those lengths. I went back and picked it all up. But anger does this weird thing to us, right? When it happens, when it flares up, it suddenly takes control. It's like we have no control over what's going on anymore in our lives. You know, over the past couple of weeks, we've been looking at the words of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, and we've had these moments in it where we've had to stop and go, did Jesus really say that? Right? We've heard Jesus talk about a lot of things, but did he really say that in that way? And today what I want to look at is what Jesus has to say about anger. Now listen, those of you that got in a fight with your spouse on the way here, you're angry, we're really glad that you're here. This service is for you. You should take good notes. Maybe when you think about anger though, you don't have like an anger issue, but you know that you have this anger that kind of just sits below the surface. Sort of like boiling water, right? It's not going overboard, it's not going out of the pot, it's not messing up the kitchen, but it's boiling and it's there. You would say like, I'm not really outwardly angry, but I can feel it, I can sense it. You have this high level of frustration. Maybe you are one of those people that are easily angered, right? You just hate people. When people are like, don't you just love the world? And you're like, maybe. People just make you crazy. You go to work, there are more people, they drive you nuts. You come home, there are more people, they drive you nuts. You have this anger that just exists there. Or maybe you're going, I don't know that I need this sermon. I think I know what Jesus would say about anger. He would say, just don't be angry. Which is the interesting thing, because Jesus never says don't be angry, but he takes how we think about anger to a whole different place. Now, if you have a Bible, you can turn with me to Matthew chapter 5. We're gonna start in verse 21. If you don't have a Bible with you, you can follow along on your phone, or it's gonna be up on the screen behind us. Jesus said this. He said, you have heard what our ancestors were told. You must not murder. If you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. So for hundreds of years, this audience that Jesus is talking to, they've heard about the 10 Commandments. They know in it says, do not murder. They've heard this before. Jesus says, if you murder someone, you will be subject to judgment. They know this, they've heard this before, and it's not just judgment from God, but it's the judgment that we feel from people around us. It's the judgment in the court system, right? We know certain actions have certain consequences to them. Now, I have to imagine if I'm in this crowd and I hear Jesus say this, this isn't that profound, right? You're kind of going, wow, this guy's really great. Like, we know, don't kill people. Like, this is normal. We get this. But then Jesus does this. Verse 22, he says, but I say, which is when Jesus is about to drop the mic, right? You could feel it. You could kind of sense it. Jesus is about to take whatever that he's talking about and flip it on top of its head. He says, let me show you what this really means. He says, but I say, if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. So what Jesus is doing is essentially saying that you will receive the same punishment as if you murdered someone if you are angry with them, which would make all of us go, that doesn't sound right. That feels weird, right? Is Jesus really saying that murder and anger somehow equate to the same consequence, the same punishment? They have the same effects. And I think Jesus' answer is yes. Now, the word that Jesus uses for anger here is super significant. I don't expect you guys to know what I'm about to say, but if you do, more power to you. The Greek word that Jesus uses here for anger is what we would call a present participle. I'm a nerd. What that means is that it's not just you are angry, right? It means that you are engulfed in anger. Everywhere you go, you are angry. You feel it. It's attached to you, right? It's the difference between saying, I got angry today at this person, and saying, I am angry at this person, and it's been going on for weeks. Have you ever felt that kind of anger? Right? Some of you have. You can't sleep because of that kind of anger. You try to, but you sit there and you think about it and you stew on it. It's the kind of anger that forces you to have imaginary conversations in the car. You know these. You're like preparing to be around someone that you're angry with, and so you're like playing out how the conversation's gonna go. And it's funny, because in those conversations, aren't we always the hero in them? Like we're always on the right side of it. Maybe it's caused you to it's the anger that's caused you to join like a CrossFit box or to join a kickboxing club, because only someone who's that angry would do one of those two things. Right, you get it. It's the anger that just festers. It sits there. It does not leave you. And I'm sure that some of us have felt that before, the kind of anger that we can't let go. I know that I have. But anytime that happens, it's because we have this unresolved anger that we are carrying around. It's something that we've refused to let go of, and the enemy uses that as a foothold. See, we have to recognize something, though, about what Jesus is saying about anger, because we can get all out of whack with this. Jesus is not saying that being angry is bad. He's not saying having a moment of anger is bad, right? There's good anger. Poverty, it may make you angry. Racial injustice or human trafficking or seeing or hearing the story of an abused spouse, it may make you angry. That's angry. That's good anger. That's what the Bible would call righteous anger. It's anger that draws you to an action, to a response that makes the world more like God and less like us. Right, there is good anger, but here's the truth. If we're honest, we would all like to say, I have righteous anger. This person did something wrong to me, so it's righteous. The truth is, most of us don't struggle with good anger. Most of us struggle with the rest of it. We struggle with the rest of it. Later writers of the scriptures would try to kind of expound on what Jesus talked about. Paul would write in the book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 26, he says this, he says, "And don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil." Listen, a foothold is not like being possessed by a demon or something. A foothold is simply this, right? If your faith is a journey, right? You're on this journey of trying to know more about God. A foothold is literally something that stops you in your path and it keeps you from moving forward. Some of you are in your faith and you're going, man, I feel like I'm not moving forward. I feel like I'm not progressing. I feel like there's something wrong with me. I feel like my faith is not as vibrant as I want it to be. And what I would wonder is if anger is something that is holding you back. Because I think Jesus and the other writers of the scriptures are trying to say this: anger becomes lethal when it becomes luggage. Anger becomes lethal when it becomes luggage, right? You know this. If you've ever flown on an airplane and you take carry-on luggage with you, right? You have to get your ticket, so you go to the ticket counter, you got this bag with you. You have to go through security, you have to take it with you. You may even have to open up that luggage and let other people see it, but you have to go through security. You can't go anywhere without it. You wanna go get an Egg McMuffin at McDonald's in the airport. Guess what has to come with you? That luggage. You wanna go to the bathroom. You can't go alone. The luggage is coming with you. Listen, anger becomes lethal when we carry it around everywhere, and it begins to give the enemy control. It gives fear control. It gives hate control in our lives. And when anger is unresolved, when it's carried one day to the next, when it stays in the present versus staying in my past, it becomes so very dangerous. Now, that doesn't mean that every issue in life needs to be resolved in 24 hours. Maybe you've heard someone preach on this before and they say, you got to resolve everything in 24 hours. Some issues in life are too big to be resolved in 24 hours. That's not what Jesus is saying. But Jesus is saying, if you are holding on to it, if it is keeping you from moving forward in your life and in your faith, if it is keeping you stuck where you are, you have to do something about it. Because we just carry it around with us. I'm a big fan of kids' movies. Some of you might be as well. The rest of you are just in denial about the creative and magical world that we live in with talking toys. I love Toy Story. Any Toy Story fans out there? Yeah. Someone over there, that's awesome. One of the scenes I love in Toy Story, Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head are talking to each other and she looks at him and she says, "Are you in a good mood?" And he says, "I don't know." And she goes, "Well, okay, I'm gonna pack your angry eyes just in case." The truth is, some of us are a little bit like that. We just pack our angry eyes. We have so much luggage and this burden of anger that we go everywhere with it and we cannot escape it. We've allowed the sun to go down on our anger, not just on something that happened in a day, but in a season, maybe through generations of life. We've held on to anger from childhood. We've carried it into adolescence. We've carried it from that into adulthood and into marriage. And we wonder why we still have anger. See, listen, anger becomes lethal when it becomes luggage, which is why I think why Jesus addresses anger so head on in the Sermon on the Mount, because it's so crucial to our lives. See, as Jesus begins to peel back the onion in this sermon, he's saying, listen, you're blessed by God, you're loved by God, you're called to be the salt and the light of the world, but we have some problems that we have to deal with. And he brings up murder, but he says, listen, murder, most of you haven't murdered someone, I hope. But murder is not the problem. The problem is that we feel the emotions that lead to murder in our everyday lives. But Jesus also knows this about people. We love a good loophole, right? We love to be able to look at the scriptures and go, I don't think that really matters. I don't think that really counts. I'm not really that angry. I've certainly never tried to kill someone, unless you were the garbage guy at my apartment. We don't do those things. We just don't get that extreme. So Jesus says this. He says, if you say to your brother, Raka, you are in danger of being brought before the court. Anyone in here ever said Raka to someone? No, me either, because that's the first time I've said it out loud. Raka is not a word that we would just throw around, but it's an idiom. It's something you would say to someone if you thought they were stupid. Something you would say to them if you thought they were empty-headed or they were not intelligent. You're essentially just calling them dumb. The NLT, I think, translates it the best. It says, if you call someone an idiot, you are in danger of being brought before the court. And if you curse someone, you are in danger of the fires of hell. If you call someone an idiot. You know, I was thinking about this as I was kind of putting this together, and I've already told you one story that makes me look like I've lost my mind, so I'll tell you another one. I was out in California not long ago training a group of pastors with some discipleship stuff, and I was trying to fly back here, and I moved my flight up a little bit, and I knew I was gonna cut it close on getting to the airport and get through security, so I called an Uber, and the guy says he'll be there in 15 minutes, and 15 minutes go by, 20 minutes goes by, 25 minutes goes by. And while I'm standing on this very obvious, what I feel like is a very obvious place to be standing, I see this black car drive by me like 5 times. Finally, I get a phone call from my Uber driver. He says, hey, I can't find you. I can't see you anywhere. And I go, what kind of car do you drive? He goes, oh, I'm in a black car. Okay, so you've driven by me 5 times now. That's great. I was like, oh, I'm right here. And he's like, oh man, I just didn't see you. Idiot. What an idiot. Then I get in the car. And this car is great, a very nice guy. It's a stick shift. And we're in LA, so there's a lot of traffic. In my opinion, driving a stick shift in LA, just a bad idea, right? I'm sitting in the back seat. I feel like I'm on a roller coaster. It's like back and forth all the time. I'm starting to get car sick, and all that's going through my head is, what kind of idiot buys a stick shift? And it slowly gets worse, right? You're like, gosh, what is it? Why is this guy an Uber driver? He's not even a good driver. Like, what? An idiot. It just keeps going through my head. Then I get to the airport. TSA line's pretty short, so I feel pretty good about it. There's only one girl ahead of me, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna go quick. But TSA at certain airports, they're a little more strict than others. And as we start to go through, I'm just watching her, and she is taking forever to get through the security line. Right? And I begin to look at her and I start thinking to myself, you wore shoes to the airport? Like, what kind of monster are you? And there's shoes with laces? Oh, what an idiot. How many computers do you have? How long could this take? You have to take everything out of your bag? Why don't you just check it? Idiot just keeps rolling through my mind. Right, here's the truth. I know that that's probably a bit of an extreme example, but we all have those moments in life where we're in a scenario or we're in a situation with people and we just begin to go, man, what an idiot. How stupid could that person be? And the truth is, Jesus is not saying that you have to be perfect, but Jesus is saying that those situations over time begin to build baggage of anger in your life. And the baggage is what he's concerned about, but that means that those short bursts of anger and frustration that we feel throughout the day are not pleasing to God either. Here's what we know about what Jesus is saying, and I think this is super important to recognize. He says, don't say raka to someone, don't call them an idiot, don't curse someone. There's 2 things that does to people, right? It's an attack on their character, and it's an attack on their intelligence. We're no longer talking about what someone does, we're talking about who they are, right? You've had these moments, you've had someone do this to you, where someone begins to criticize you because they don't like something that you've done. right? It would be like you making a really bad dinner for your family and everyone at the table going, Mom, you're just not a good cook. The truth is, you're probably a pretty good cook. You just made a bad meal. We've all felt that, where someone begins to come after our character and our intelligence, and we all know which one hurts worse when someone attacks who we really are. See, here's the truth. The luggage of anger that you carry around, I don't believe that you put it there. If you feel it, I don't believe you invited it in. I don't believe most of us wake up every day and go, man, I would really like to be angry today. I'd really like that. The truth is that most people, I would guess 99 times out of 100, people who struggle with anger, it has all been preceded by hurt. Right? You've heard that saying before, hurt people hurt people. I think that's so true. Maybe you've been through a divorce or through a separation. You thought you would spend the rest of your life with this person, but they were unfaithful. They stopped trying. They quit giving effort. They disengaged, and then they left, and you were there, and you had to figure out how to pick up the pieces. And every time you think about them, anger and hate and frustration wells up inside of you. Maybe you've been hurt by your employer or your boss, and you are the first one into work. You are the last one out. You put in more hours than anyone does. You've sacrificed vacation, and no one has noticed. And you're hurt about it. You're mad. So now resentment has begun to grow in your life towards your job and towards your boss. Maybe it's your parents. Maybe it reaches all the way back to your childhood. Maybe you had alcoholic parents or abusive parents. And now all that you have to think about is bad memories, and they stay there. They keep swirling, and you just think about the horrible childhood that you had. Maybe for you, it's something else. Maybe you have friends that have betrayed you. You have dating relationships that have gone sour, and they've hurt you, and you have welled up anger because of it. Listen, here's what I know to be true. If I were to say, hey, are there 5 people in here that would share with us why they're angry today? You would come up here and tell us why you're angry, and we would all probably applaud and be like, that's great. You should be angry. It makes sense that you're angry. But here's the deal. At some point, that anger doesn't just stay for a few hours. It begins to take up home in our lives, and it begins to affect every area of it. Right? Listen, anger becomes lethal when it becomes luggage. When you hold on to it, it begins to hurt you. It affects our relationships and our marriages and our friendships and our dating relationships, and it spills over into every part of who we are, because that bitterness grows into anger, and then anger grows into hate, and then before you know it, we are in so much hurt that we don't know what to do with it. Here's the other thing that I think is interesting. The heart of anger, the thing that it says to us, the thing that it causes us to repeat is, you owe me. Right? When you get hurt by someone, and you become angry, you feel like someone owes you something. You feel like they are indebted to you. If you grew up in a broken home, or someone robbed you of an opportunity to be tucked in by parents every night, or your parents separated when you were young and they robbed you of a stable home, or if your husband or wife left, you might feel like they robbed you of your marriage and the ability to have this perfect family with the white picket fence and the 2 kids and the mom and the dad, or you feel like you've been robbed of opportunity at your job or of money or position. We all carry anger into another season, and then we keep the account open, is what happens. Right, in essence, we just say, we're not gonna close this, we're not gonna forget about it, we're gonna leave this here, and I'm gonna keep it open until the person who owes me pays me back. But here's the problem, and we know this, but it's hard to accept. Most of the things that we want people to fix can't be fixed. How do you repay a broken childhood? How do you repay a marriage that's fallen to pieces? How do you repay a broken, once-in-a-lifetime business deal that you got shorted out? How do you repay that? The truth is, you can't. So we end up just looking like fools, walking through life expecting people to pay us back for something they've done wrong that they can't. Listen, the truth is we have to do something about it. Right? Jesus brings up anger, which means that there has to be something we can do in our lives to limit anger in our lives, to limit how it controls us, to limit it as the luggage that we carry from season to season. So I want to give you a few things as we wrap up here today to help you get there. Listen, I think if we want to move from being people with all this baggage, we have to do one thing first, and we have to identify the person that we believe owes us. Right? For some of you, you struggle with anger with God because you believe he owes you a better life. For some of you, you struggle with anger with people because you believe that they've wronged you. But Jesus says we have to identify who we're angry with because we are subject to the judgment of God. Very rarely in Scripture is there a verse that says, if you do this, you are subject to the judgment. That means this is massively important. It has to be important. We can't take how we deal with our anger lightly. So you have to identify the person who owes you. And the truth is, some of you are gonna hear this today. You have a name, you have a person that's popped up in your head, and you're gonna go home and do nothing about it. It's easier to stew on it. Or you begin to think, well, I don't know that they deserve it yet. But here's the deal. Once we identify the person who's wronged us, we have to pursue reconciliation at all costs. Jesus would go on to say in the Sermon on the Mount right after this, he says, so if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. Do you guys see what Jesus just did? The whole first part of this little piece of his Sermon on the Mount, he's been talking about how we have anger towards people, but then he switches it and he says, if you recognize someone is angry at you, which is the funny part, right? Because we all think that when we're angry, no one else could possibly be angry at us. We've never done anything wrong. We're perfect. When that person cuts us off on the highway and we lose our minds, we don't consider the time that we cut off 5 people on the way to work that morning. Right? Jesus says, and this is mind-blowing to me, Jesus says, if there is a problem rooted in anger between you and someone else, he says, you may come to church on Sunday, you may stand and sing songs, you may volunteer, you may give your finances, you may take communion, you may listen to a sermon, you may do all of that. Jesus says, I would rather you leave and go solve your problem. I would rather you go home and figure it out. Some of you are like, I should probably leave right now. Some of you, here's the truth though. If Jesus is saying, I would rather you solve your relational issues than be at church, you have to take that for what it is. Jesus says, I would rather you solve the problem between you and the person you're angry with, because how can you stand and sing songs of love to God when you can't say a loving word to someone else? We can't do it. It's not who we're built to be. We have to pursue reconciliation at all costs. And once we identify that person and we say, we are gonna pursue this, we will leave everything that we have to solve this problem, to get rid of anger in our life, we have to cancel the debt. We have to cancel the debt. Now you might go, but I've got a story that goes all the way back to my childhood. I get it. How long do you want that to be your story? We all love a good story, but how long do you want that to be your story? You might go, well, I'm just not ready to forgive that person. I'm just not ready to do it. Yeah, I get it. Some of us have been hurt and wronged, and it's created deep wells of anger in us, but at some point, it's not about us receiving something from another person, right? The time, the perfect timing to do this. It's about us letting something go. Right, forgiveness can be such a misunderstood term. We make it very churchy, we overuse it all the time, but the truth about forgiveness is that it's a financial term. It simply means to cancel the debt, to look someone in the face and say, you don't owe me anymore. You may have wronged me, you may have hurt me, you may have caused so much pain in my life that I have to deal with it all the time, but you don't owe me anymore. You just don't owe me. I used to tell people that the truth about forgiveness is that forgiveness is when you set someone free, but you find out that it was you. I think that's so true. Forgiveness is never about someone else getting something. It's about you being let go. Jesus did not die on a cross for you to hold on to pain, for you to hold on to anger, for you to hold on to unforgiveness. Jesus did not die for that. Jesus died for you to be free. See, forgiveness closes the debt. It shuts the door. It says we're not going back there, because keeping an account open does nothing good for anyone. That person that you can think of that you need to deal with some anger with, all you have to say to them is, you don't owe me anymore. It doesn't mean what you did was right. It doesn't mean that I was fine with it. It doesn't mean that I even think it's okay, but you don't owe me anything anymore. You might go, well, what if I can't talk to him face to face? Call him, write him a letter. What if I can't do that? What if they're dead? And write a letter and burn it, set it on fire. Do something to mark that person no longer is indebted to you. You are not entitled to them being okay with you anymore. You do not need that. See, the luggage that you've been carrying of anger and shame and resentment and pride, you can actually leave them in this room today. You don't have to even get back in the car with them. We can let it all go. We can leave it. We don't have to pick it back up. The beautiful thing about the life and death of Jesus is that it was this beautiful model of what forgiveness can look like. Jesus wasn't on the cross going, I don't know if I'm ready to do this yet. I don't know if I'm willing to let them go. I don't know if I'm willing to cancel the jet, which means you don't have to be that way either. In a moment, we're gonna receive communion. And the trays are gonna be passed. There's gonna be a cup with juice in it, a cup with bread in it that represents Jesus' broken body, Jesus' shed blood. Listen, for some of you, the hardest way to move through anger, the only option you may have is to say, Jesus, I need you to help me. And we'd love to be a part of that conversation. You can meet us at Next Steps at the end of the service. Come and talk to me. I'd love to have a conversation with you. But here's the truth. Nobody has to owe you anymore. They don't have to be your enemy. You don't have to be their enemy. You don't have to be angry all the time. You don't have to have that low simmering anger. You don't have to hate them. People of God do not have to be the people who are frustrated and bitter and angry and lack joy. You do not have to be that. You get to sit it down and you get to leave it. Would you pray with me this morning? God, what we're thankful for right now more than anything is that we can leave this room and be different. That we can leave this room and never again be concerned about the people who we believe owe us. Those roots, those causes of anger, they are not what control us anymore. God, we know that the blood and the body and the sacrifice of Jesus is a model of forgiveness. God, and if we don't model forgiveness to the world, who will? So God, as we eat and as we drink, would you speak to us? Would you let us know about the people in our lives that we need to say, you don't owe me anymore? It may be someone in this room. It may be someone that is in our family. It may be a close friend.